The ground shook with the sound of angry drums. Villagers gathered in the square, their faces lit by the orange glow of torches. At the center of the crowd, a young girl knelt, trembling. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with tears and dust. The wicked chief, tall and heavy, stood above her. His eyes burned with pride and cruelty. Beside him lay a half-eaten yam, the evidence of her so-called crime. "She has stolen from me," the chief roared. His voice rolled like thunder across the crowd. "No one steals from my barn and goes unpunished. She is cursed, a greedy mouth in a time of hunger. For this, she shall be buried alive." Gasps broke out. Mothers clutched their children. Old men shook their heads but dared not speak. The orphan girl, weak from hunger, pleaded, "Please, great chief, I was only hungry. I meant no harm. I only wanted to live." But the chief waved his hand, silencing her. He ordered his guards to drag her to the edge of the village, where the earth was loose and damp from rain. There, a shallow grave had already been dug. The villagers watched in silence, their hearts torn. Some looked away. Some whispered prayers. The girl cried out one last time as the guards lowered her into the pit. The earth began to cover her small body. Her voice grew fainter and fainter until it was swallowed by the soil. And so, the poor orphan girl was buried alive for stealing a single yam. But 3 days later, something happened in that same spot that left the entire village trembling in fear. What rose from the earth was not what anyone expected. Before we continue, please like and subscribe and let us know where you're watching from. Long before that shocking day, the village of Yumun was a place full of laughter, stories, and songs. It sat between rolling green hills and a wide river that glistened under the sun. The people were farmers, hunters, and weavers. They tilled the soil with joy, shared harvest feasts, and told folktales by the fire at night. In Yumun, family was everything. Neighbors cared for one another. Children ran freely between houses, and no one went to bed without greeting their elders. But there was one dark shadow in this land of light, the chief. Chief Oba was feared more than he was loved. He was a man of great wealth, with yam barns that stretched wider than the village square. His compound had tall walls and heavy guards. He wore fine wrappers dyed in deep reds and blacks, his head always high, his voice always loud. The people respected him, but only because they had no choice. He ruled with an iron fist. Whoever displeased him was punished. Whoever crossed him was banished. Among the villagers lived a young orphan girl named Adana. She had lost both parents to a sickness that swept through the land when she was only 6. Since then she had lived on scraps of kindness, some days eating, some days not. Her clothes were thin, her body frail, but her spirit was bright. Adana was known for her wide smile, her gentle voice, and her readiness to help anyone in need. She fetched water for the old women, carried firewood for mothers, and watched the babies while their mothers went to farm. She had nothing, but she gave everything she could. Yet not everyone saw her goodness. To Chief Oba, she was nothing more than a nuisance, a reminder of weakness and poverty. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky with gold, Adana sat by the river. Her stomach growled painfully. She had not eaten since the previous morning. The other children splashed and played, their laughter filling the air, but Adana could not join them. She was too weak. She remembered her mother's words. "When you are hungry, sing. Songs are food for the spirit until the body finds its own." So she sang softly, her voice carried by the breeze. An old woman named Mama Ifioma, who was washing cassava by the river, heard her and shook her head sadly. "Poor child," she whispered. "Hunger has no mercy." That night, Adana went to bed with only water in her belly. The stars above seemed too far to hear her silent prayers. She asked for food, for kindness, for just one chance to live like other children. Days turned into weeks, and hunger tightened its grip on her. Then came the season of yam harvest. The air was filled with the smell of roasted yam and palm oil. Children walked around with yellow fingers from eating so much. But Adana had none. Every time she passed by Chief Oba's compound, she saw heaps upon heaps of yams, more than one man could eat in a lifetime. Her heart pounded with longing. Just one yam, she thought. One yam to stop this fire in my belly. But the chief's barns were guarded day and night. Everyone knew he counted his yams like a miser counts his gold. Still, hunger makes the boldest plans. And Adana, with no family to defend her, was about to make a choice that would change everything. That night, under the cover of darkness, she crept toward the chief's yam barn. The crickets sang loudly, the moon hid behind clouds, and the guards dozed at their posts. Her heart hammered in her chest. She whispered to herself, "Forgive me, Mama. Forgive me, Papa. I only want to live." She reached through the wooden bars of the barn and pulled out one small yam. Just one. She clutched it to her chest and ran into the night. The next morning, the chief discovered that a yam was missing. His roar shook the compound. "Who dares steal from me?" he thundered. The guards trembled, the servants bowed low, and the villagers gathered in fear. A search began, and soon, a trail of footprints in the soft earth led straight to Adana's small hut. The chief's eyes gleamed with fury. "Bring her to me," he commanded. Adana was dragged before the village, the half-eaten yam in her trembling hands. And in that moment, her fate was sealed. The chief raised his staff and declared, "For this crime she will not only be punished, she will be buried alive." The crowd gasped. Mothers wept. Fathers lowered their eyes. No one dared speak against the chief. Adana's lips quivered. "Please. I only wanted to live." But Chief Oba's heart was harder than stone. The drums began to beat. The grave was being dug. And the whole village watched as the earth opened its mouth to swallow the poor orphan girl. The morning of the punishment was strangely quiet. The sun hid behind a thick curtain of clouds, and the birds that usually filled the air with song were silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Villagers gathered slowly, their faces heavy with sorrow and fear. Nobody wanted to be there, yet nobody dared stay away. When the chief gave an order, it was as strong as law itself. At the center of the square, Adana stood surrounded by the chief's guards. Her small frame looked even smaller between their tall bodies. The yam she had stolen lay on the ground before her, now shriveled from being half-eaten. The chief stepped forward, dressed in his finest red wrapper. Cowrie shells clinked on his ankles as he walked. His staff, carved with the head of a crocodile, struck the earth with each step, demanding silence. "People of Yumun," he began, his voice rising like a storm, "we are a land of laws. And today those laws have been broken. This girl," he pointed at Adana with a crooked finger, "entered my barn in the night and stole from me. A thief among us is like a sickness. If we do not cut it out, it will spread." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, afraid to disagree. Others shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke. Adana's knees trembled. She wanted to scream, to beg again, but something inside her told her words would change nothing. She bit her lips and let tears run silently down her face. From the back of the crowd, Mama Ifioma, the old woman who had once heard Adana singing by the river, stepped forward. Her gray hair framed her wrinkled face, but her eyes shone with courage. "Great chief," she said, bowing low, "this child is hungry. She has no mother, no father, no one to care for her. Must hunger now be a crime?" The chief's eyes darkened. "Old woman, do you dare challenge me?" Mama Ifioma bowed again, her voice trembling but firm. "I only beg for mercy. One yam out of thousands. Surely the barns of the chief will not empty because of it." The crowd held its breath. Chief Oba's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Mercy. If we show mercy to one thief, soon others will rise. Today it is one yam. Tomorrow it will be 10. And soon all my barns will be bare." His voice thundered, shaking the very air. "No. She shall face her punishment. Let the grave be ready." At his command, The drummers began to beat their drums slowly, each boom echoing like a heartbeat. 2 strong men lifted Adana by the arms, dragging her toward the edge of the village where a pit had been dug. The villagers followed, their feet heavy, their voices silent. Adana looked around one last time, hoping someone, anyone, would step forward to save her. But every eye turned away. Some wept quietly, others prayed under their breath, but none had the courage to oppose the chief. The pit yawned before her, dark and damp. Adana's heart raced. The smell of wet earth filled her nose. She thought of her mother's gentle hands, her father's laughter, the warmth of their hut. Now she would never see them again. The chief raised his staff. "Bury her." The guards lowered Adana into the grave. The soil felt cold beneath her bare feet. She screamed and clawed at the walls, but the earth gave way in her hands. Her cries pierced the air, but no one moved to stop the guards. Scoop by scoop, the dirt began to cover her body. First her feet, then her legs. Adana's voice grew hoarse as she begged. "Please, please, I only wanted to live." But the drums drowned her out. When the soil reached her chest, she looked up at the sky. The clouds had parted, and a single beam of sunlight fell on her face. In that moment she whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for the people who were too afraid to stand for what was right. Finally the earth swallowed her whole. The drumming stopped. Silence fell heavy over the land. Chief Oba turned to the villagers. "Let this be a lesson. No one steals from me and lives." He raised his staff high, and the crowd cheered weakly, though their hearts were filled with sorrow. That night, the village was restless. Mothers held their children close, warning them never to steal. Fathers sat by fires, silent and troubled. Even the animals seemed uneasy. The dogs howled, the goats bleated, and the owls hooted into the night. Mama Ifioma sat outside her hut, tears streaming down her face. She whispered into the darkness, "Spirits of our ancestors, this child was innocent. Do not let her soul suffer." Little did she know that the ancestors had heard. And 3 days later, the entire village would witness something that would shake their spirits to the core. For when the earth moved where Adana had been buried, it was not death that rose. It was something far greater and far more terrifying. The first day after Adana's burial was heavy. The air in Yumun felt thick, like a blanket of sorrow pressed upon the people. Children did not laugh as they fetched water, and the elders spoke in hushed tones. Even the market, usually full of chatter and bargaining, was unusually quiet. But Chief Oba was satisfied. He sat in his large compound, chewing kola nuts and boasting to his advisors. "Now they know," he said with pride, his teeth stained red. "No one dares touch my yams again. Fear is the strongest guard for a chief." The advisors nodded, though some did so reluctantly. They knew the punishment had been too harsh, but none dared say so. Meanwhile, Mama Ifioma could not rest. She tossed and turned in her hut that night, haunted by the sound of Adana's cries as the soil covered her. She dreamt of rivers overflowing, of trees bending low, and of a voice calling, "Mama Ifioma! Mama Ifioma!" She woke with sweat on her face and her heart pounding. On the second day, strange things began to happen. The sky was clear, yet the wind howled through the village like a restless spirit. The chickens refused to leave their coops, and goats kicked and bleated wildly as if they sensed danger. When women went to the river to fetch water, they swore they heard a girl's voice singing softly beneath the current. One woman dropped her calabash in fright. "It is her. It is Adana's voice," she cried. But the others hushed her quickly, glancing around to make sure no one else had heard. They feared Chief Oba's ears more than spirits. That evening, the young boys who tended the chief's yam barns came running back, breathless and pale. "Chief! Chief!" they shouted. The chief frowned. "Why do you run like frightened goats? Speak!" The bravest of them stammered. "We saw footprints, chief. Fresh footprints near the barn. But they were not normal. They rose from the ground and led back to the place where the girl was buried. The chief's face darkened. "Nonsense," he barked. "The girl is dead. Do you want me to believe a corpse walks?" But when the boys swore on their mother's names that they were telling the truth, even the chief's advisors exchanged uneasy glances. That night Chief Oba dreamed a dream. He saw Adana standing before him, her face glowing with light. Her eyes were calm, but her voice thundered in his ears. "You buried me for hunger. Now hunger will bury you." He woke with a shout, sweat soaking his wrapper. His chest heaved, and for the first time in years, fear crept into his heart. By the third day, the signs could no longer be ignored. The ground at the edge of the village, where Adana had been buried, began to shift. At first it was small, just a tremor like the earth sighing in its sleep. Then cracks appeared in the soil. Villagers who passed by stopped in their tracks, pointing with wide eyes. "Look," a child whispered. "The ground is moving." "No, it cannot be," an elder muttered, clutching his staff. The people gathered around the spot, their whispers rising like a swarm of bees. Some crossed themselves, some muttered prayers, and others fled back to their huts in terror. Then it happened. With a loud crack, the earth burst open. Dust and dirt flew into the air. The people screamed and stumbled back. From the pit, something began to rise. At first, it was just a hand, small and covered in soil, reaching upward as though grasping for the sky. Then came a voice, faint but clear, calling the name of the village. "Yumun." The crowd gasped in horror. "It is her. It is Adana." But as the figure slowly emerged, it was not the weak, starving orphan girl they remembered. Her body glowed faintly, her hair shone like threads of gold, and her eyes burned with a light that made even the bravest men tremble. She stood tall, her torn clothes now gleaming like white cloth washed in pure rivers. The earth seemed to bow at her feet, and the wind circled around her like an obedient servant. Mama Ifioma fell to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Spirits of our ancestors," she cried. "She has returned." The villagers shouted and scattered, some running into the bush, others dropping flat on the ground. Only a few remained standing, too shocked to move. Chief Oba was summoned quickly. When he arrived and saw the glowing figure of Adana standing on the very spot where she had been buried, his staff nearly slipped from his hand. "This is witchcraft," he roared, though his voice shook. "She is not human. She is a curse sent to destroy us." But deep inside, fear gnawed at him. For the girl he thought powerless now looked upon him with eyes that pierced through his soul. Adana raised her hand, and the wind grew stronger, whirling dust around the square. Her voice rang out, clear and powerful. "You buried me for stealing a yam. Now the land will judge between us." The villagers gasped, their hearts beating like drums. Something was about to happen, something that would change Yumun forever. And the chief, for the first time, felt the weight of a power greater than his own. The wind howled louder, spinning dust and leaves into the air. The villagers clung to one another, their eyes wide with fear. Adana stood in the middle of the storm, glowing like a flame that refused to die. Her voice rose above the noise, carrying power it had never held before. "You called me a thief because I was hungry. You buried me like a weed. But the earth, the same earth you used to cover me, has spoken. The yam that fills your barns belongs to all, not to one. The land feeds everyone." People gasped. These were dangerous words. To say the yam was not the chief's alone was to challenge his rule. Chief Oba's face darkened with rage, though his trembling hands betrayed him. He slammed his staff into the ground. "Silence! You are no child of this village. You are a spirit sent to deceive us. Guards, seize her." But the guards, strong men who had buried Adana themselves, froze. Their eyes darted between the glowing figure and the furious chief. Their hands shook. None dared step forward. "Did you not hear me?" Chief Oba roared. "Seize her." Still they did not move. Instead, an elder, stooped with age but strong in voice, stepped out from the crowd. It was Elder Namdi, one of the oldest men in Yumun. He leaned on his staff, his voice calm but cutting. "Chief Oba," he said, "the earth has returned the girl you buried. Do you not fear what this means? Perhaps the ancestors themselves are angry." The chief turned on him, eyes blazing. "Elder, beware. Your tongue may be old, but it can still bring you trouble. Do not stand against me." But the villagers murmured in agreement with Elder Namdi. The sight of Adana standing alive and radiant before them had stirred something deep in their hearts. They had always feared the chief, but now they feared something greater, the justice of the earth. Mama Ifioma fell to her knees before Adana. "Child," she cried, "if you are truly sent by the ancestors, show us a sign. Let us know the truth." Adana turned her face upward. The storm calmed, and silence fell over the land. Then she bent down, scooped a handful of soil, and held it high. To the shock of everyone watching, the soil turned into fresh yam seedlings right before their eyes. Gasps filled the air. The women covered their mouths. The men staggered back. "The land feeds us all," Adana said again, her voice soft but firm. "No one should hoard while others starve. No child should die of hunger in a land of plenty." The crowd began to murmur louder now, this time with boldness. Mothers pulled their children close and nodded. Fathers clenched their fists, realizing the truth of her words. Even the guards stepped back from the chief's side, unsure if they should still serve him. Chief Oba's face twisted in anger. "Enough. She is a witch, I tell you. If we allow her words to spread, she will destroy the order of this village. I will end this with my own hands." He raised his staff, its crocodile head gleaming in the fading light. With a furious shout, he charged toward Adana. But before his staff could strike, a sudden rumble shook the ground. The earth beneath his feet cracked open, and he stumbled back with a cry. The villagers screamed and scattered, some falling to the ground. From the crack, water burst forth, clear and rushing like a spring newly born. It soaked the soil, running into the fields. Farmers shouted in wonder. This was no ordinary water. Wherever it touched, the earth seemed to grow green instantly. People stared stunned. In 3 days, the girl who had been buried had risen. And now, from the very grave meant to silence her, life itself had sprung forth. The chief fell backward, his staff slipping from his hand. His mouth hung open, but no words came. For the first time, the villagers saw not power in his eyes, but fear. Adana stepped forward, her glow lighting the water. "You see now," she said, "that the earth cannot be deceived. Knows justice. Knows mercy. The yam you hoard is the gift of the land. It cannot be owned by one man." The villagers erupted into cries. Some shouted her name. Some called her a spirit. Some wept openly, feeling the weight of their silence during her suffering. Chief Oba tried to rise, but his legs trembled beneath him. His pride was crumbling, and his authority was slipping like sand through his fingers. The people were no longer looking at him with fear. They were looking at Adana. And for the first time in his rule, Chief Oba realized he was no longer the strongest voice in Yumun. But in his heart, dark thoughts began to form. If he could not control the people with fear, he would find another way to destroy this girl. He clenched his fists and swore silently. "She may have risen once, but I will not let her rise again." The struggle for the heart of the village had only just begun. That night, the village of Yumun could not sleep. Some people gathered around the fresh spring that had burst forth from the earth where Adana was buried. They touched the water with trembling hands, whispering prayers of thanks to the ancestors. Others sat in their huts, speaking in low voices, afraid that even the walls might carry their words to the ears of Chief Oba. Mama Ifioma, unable to rest, made her way to the spring. She found Adana sitting by the water, her glowing presence softer now but still radiant. Adana's face looked calm, yet her eyes held sorrow. "My child," Mama Ifioma whispered, kneeling beside her, What you have done is beyond what any human can do. Are you truly Adana, the orphan girl, or are you one of the ancestors returned to us?" Adana placed a hand on the old woman's shoulder. "Mama, I am still Adana. I felt the earth close over me. I felt the darkness of death. But I also felt the voice of the land calling me back. It gave me life so I could remind the people of truth. Food belongs to all, not to one. No one should starve while another builds barns of plenty." Mama Ifioma bowed her head, tears falling freely. "Then the ancestors chose well. But child, be careful. Chief Oba will not accept this. His pride is deeper than his barns." Adana nodded slowly. "I know. The chief's heart is like stone, and stone does not break easily. But even stone cannot stand against the river forever." As if on cue, the spring gurgled louder, the water flowing into small streams that snaked toward the village farms. Crops that had been wilting in the dry season began to lift their heads, greener than before. The villagers, seeing this, fell to their knees in awe. But in his compound, Chief Oba was plotting. He sat alone, the glow of a lantern flickering across his angry face. His staff lay beside him, useless after slipping from his grip earlier that day. He thought of the villagers' eyes, how they had shifted from him to the girl. He thought of their whispers, their cries, their hope in her. "Hope is dangerous," he muttered. "It makes people forget fear." An advisor crept into the room, bowing low. "Great Chief, forgive me, but the people are troubled. They say the girl has been chosen by the ancestors. Some are calling her a spirit of the land." Chief Oba slammed his fist on the table. "She is no spirit. She is a trick, a curse. If they follow her, they will forget me. And if they forget me, I am nothing." The advisor lowered his voice. "What will you do?" Chief Oba's eyes narrowed. "I will finish what I began. She may have risen once, but I will bury her again, this time where neither earth nor ancestors can return her." The advisor shivered but dared not reply. The next morning, Chief Oba summoned the villagers to the square. He stood tall, his voice loud as ever, but there was a crack in his confidence. "People of Yumun," he declared, "do not be fooled by tricks and lies. This girl who claims to be your savior is a danger to us all. She is not chosen by the ancestors. She is a witch. And witches bring nothing but death." The villagers murmured uncertainly. Some nodded, still afraid of him. Others shook their heads, remembering the miracle of the spring. Then Adana herself appeared, walking calmly into the square. The crowd parted for her, whispers following her every step. She faced the chief, her voice steady. "If I am a witch, then let the earth take me again. But if I speak the truth, then let the land show you a sign." The crowd held its breath. Chief Oba laughed harshly. "You dare challenge me, child? Then let us test your words. Tonight we will meet at the sacred grove. There, under the eyes of the ancestors, we will see who is favored. Me, the chief chosen to rule, or you, a hungry orphan who dares rise against me." The villagers gasped. The sacred grove was feared by all. It was said that spirits walked freely there at night, and anyone who lied before them would face instant judgment. Adana did not flinch. "So be it. At the grove, the truth will be known." The chief's eyes burned with secret malice. He had no intention of letting her leave the grove alive. Already he was planning a trap. That night, as the moon climbed high and the drums echoed through the air, the people of Yumun gathered at the sacred grove. Shadows stretched long beneath the tall trees. The air felt heavy, filled with unseen eyes. Adana stood on one side, her glow lighting the darkness. Chief Oba stood on the other, his staff in hand, his pride burning hotter than ever. The elders raised their staffs and declared, "Let the ancestors judge." The drums stopped. The grove fell silent. And in that silence something stirred. A voice rose, not human, not earthly, but deep and rumbling like thunder beneath the ground. The villagers froze, their skin crawling. The earth itself had spoken. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The villagers clutched one another, their eyes darting wildly. Some fell flat on their faces, too afraid to stand. The sacred grove was alive with power, and the voice of the earth rolled like thunder through the trees. "Who speaks falsehood before the land?" The voice boomed deep and heavy. Adana stood tall, her glowing form brightening the darkness. She pressed her palm to the earth. "I am Adana, daughter of Umun. I was buried alive for stealing a yam out of hunger. But the earth lifted me up, for my heart was clean. I speak only truth." The villagers whispered her name. Their fear mingled with awe. Some wept openly. Chief Oba, though trembling inside, forced himself to raise his staff. "And I am Oba, the rightful chief, chosen to guard this village. She is a witch, a deceiver who dares challenge me. Ancestors, strike her down if she lies." His voice cracked at the end, though he tried to hide it. The grove fell silent again. The wind died down. Even the insects stopped their song. For a moment it seemed nothing would happen. Then, with a sharp crack, the ground beneath Chief Oba split open. He staggered back as a thin flame burst upward, licking the air like a serpent's tongue. The villagers screamed. "Chief!" someone cried. "The land is angry with you." Chief Oba's eyes widened. His pride fought against his fear. "No. This is her doing. This is her witchcraft." He turned on Adana, raising his staff to strike her down once and for all. But before his staff could fall, the earth itself rebelled. The flame shot higher, wrapping around his staff and burning it to ash in his hands. Chief Oba screamed in pain, clutching his scorched fingers. His power, symbolized by that staff, was gone. The villagers gasped, their voices rising like a wave. Some shouted, "The ancestors have spoken." Others cried, "Adana is chosen." But Chief Oba was not finished. Rage twisted his face. "No, I will not bow to a child," he spat. With his bare hands, he lunged at Adana, his eyes wild with desperation. Adana did not move. She stood calm, her glow brighter than the moon above. Just as the chief reached her, the ground opened again, this time wider. A roar filled the grove, not of flame but of rushing water. A torrent burst forth, sweeping between them. Chief Oba stumbled, his feet sinking into the mud. He flailed, but the water dragged at him with merciless force. "Help me!" he screamed, reaching out to the villagers. But none moved. They only watched, frozen in terror and awe. Adana's voice rang out, steady and sad. "You buried me for hunger, chief. But hunger is not the crime. Pride is. You thought yourself greater than the land. Now the land calls you to account." The water surged, pulling Chief Oba into the crack. His scream echoed through the grove before being swallowed whole. Then the ground closed, leaving only silence and the sound of water trickling gently into the earth. The villagers stood stunned. Their chief, so powerful, so feared, was gone. But instead of joy, fear still clung to them. If the earth could swallow a chief, what hope did ordinary people have? What if they too were judged? Adana turned to them, her voice soft but strong. "Do not fear. The earth is not cruel. It punishes greed and pride, but it blesses kindness. From today, share what you have, care for one another, and no one will go hungry again. The land has given enough for all." Tears filled Mama Ifeoma's eyes. She cried out, "Hear her words. They are the truth." The people slowly dropped to their knees before Adana, not in fear, but in reverence. They began to chant her name. "Adana, Adana, Adana." Yet in Adana's heart she felt a deep weight. She had not wanted power. She had only wanted food, only wanted life. And now, she carried the burden of an entire village's hope. As the chanting rose around her, she lifted her eyes to the sky. "Ancestors," she whispered, "you returned me for a reason. Show me how to lead them. I am only a child." The wind rustled through the trees as if in answer. But far away, in the shadows beyond the grove, unseen eyes were watching. Not everyone in Yumun was ready to accept the change. Not everyone was willing to share. And those hidden enemies were already whispering plans. For though Chief Oba had fallen, greed was not yet gone from the land. The village of Yumun woke to a new day. But it was not an ordinary day. It was the first morning in many years when the people rose without fear of Chief Oba's harsh commands. His absence was felt everywhere. His compound stood silent. His guards scattered like ants whose anthill had been destroyed. Yet though many whispered with relief, others felt unease. Could a mere orphan girl, one once buried alive, truly lead them? Could the land itself truly have chosen her? At the village square, the elders gathered, their walking sticks planted firmly in the earth. The oldest among them, Elder Nadazi, lifted his voice. "My people, we cannot deny what our eyes saw." The land spoke, and Oba was swallowed. But how do we go forward? Shall a child now lead the council of men and women? The people murmured. Some nodded in agreement, others shook their heads. Adana stood among them, her simple wrapper tied at her waist, her feet bare. The glow that had wrapped her during the trial had faded, but her presence still carried weight. She stepped forward, her voice clear. "I do not seek to be chief," she said. "I only seek justice, that no one shall starve while food rots in barns. That no one shall be punished for hunger." Her words stirred the crowd. Mothers held their children tighter. Farmers exchanged thoughtful glances. But in the shadows at the edge of the gathering, not all faces were kind. Among them was Okena, Chief Oba's nephew. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched. To him, Oba's death was a disgrace. The title should have passed to his family, and now this orphan threatened to take everything. As the villagers listened to Adana, Okena leaned close to two men and whispered, "If she remains, we lose our power. Tonight we will act." The meeting ended with no decision, only the promise that the people would watch Adana's words and deeds. That evening, Adana walked alone to the stream to fetch water. She bent low, her reflection trembling in the ripples. For the first time, doubt gnawed at her. "Am I strong enough?" she whispered. "Can I guide them when I am still so young?" A soft rustling broke her thoughts. She turned quickly but saw only trees. Still, unease settled over her. She hurried home, not knowing that Okena's men were already watching her from the shadows. Back in the village, Mama Ifioma sat waiting for her. The old woman smiled, her wrinkled hands reaching out. "My child, do not fear. The ancestors did not bring you back to abandon you. They will guide you." Adana tried to smile, but before she could reply, a loud cry pierced the night. "Fire! Fire!" The people rushed out of their huts. Flames licked at the sky. It was the yam barn, the largest in the village, where food for the whole community was stored. The barn roared with heat as sparks flew. Panic spread. "Water! Bring water!" Men shouted, rushing to form lines to the stream. Adana's heart dropped. Without those yams, the village would face hunger again. She dashed toward the fire, her bare feet pounding the ground. But as she neared, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Out of the shadows stepped Okena, flanked by his men. His eyes glinted with hatred. "You claim the land chose you, orphan girl," he sneered. "Let us see if the land saves you now." Before Adana could speak, the men lunged. One grabbed her arms, another bound her wrists with rope. She struggled, but they were strong. Okena leaned close, his breath hot. "Tomorrow, the people will wake to find their chosen one gone. And I will take my rightful place as chief." The fire roared behind them, the villagers too distracted to notice what was happening in the shadows. Adana's cries were drowned by the crackling flames. Okena and his men dragged her toward the dark forest, the rope cutting into her wrists. Her heart pounded as fear and despair flooded her chest. The earth had saved her once before. But would it answer again? The night was heavy, filled with the smell of smoke from the burning yam barn. The villagers struggled to put out the flames, unaware that in the shadows, Adana was being dragged into the dark forest by Okenna and his men. Her wrists were tied, her ankles bruised from stumbling over roots and stones. Okenna walked ahead, torchlight dancing across his face. His jaw set like iron. "You should have stayed in the grave where they put you," he growled. "You are nothing but a curse." Adana's heart thumped like a drum, but she lifted her head. Her voice, though trembling, carried strength. "Okenna, why are you doing this? The land has more than enough. Why must you keep it for yourself?" Okenna spat into the dirt. "Because power belongs to those who take it. My uncle ruled with fear, and so will I. No orphan girl will shame my family." The men laughed bitterly, tightening their grip on her arms. But as they entered deeper into the forest, a strange hush fell. The night birds stopped their cries. The wind ceased. Even the crickets fell silent. The air grew thick, as if the forest itself were listening. Adana felt it first, a faint trembling beneath her bare feet. Then a low hum, like the heartbeat of the earth, rose from the ground. Her skin prickled. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Ancestors, if I truly belong to this land, do not abandon me now." Suddenly, the earth beneath them quaked. The men staggered, struggling to stay on their feet. Okenna cursed, raising his torch high. "Hold her! Don't let her move!" But the ground split open with a thunderous crack. A pillar of light burst forth, blinding them. The men screamed, covering their faces. Okenna dropped his torch, stumbling backward. Adana fell to her knees, the ropes around her wrists snapping as if cut by unseen hands. The light wrapped around her, warm and strong. Her fear melted into courage. She rose, her eyes shining like fire. "Okenna," she said, her voice echoing through the forest though she spoke softly. "You burned the food meant for the people. You seek to rule through greed. But the land has spoken. Your time is ended." The ground beneath Okenna's feet gave way. He screamed, clawing at the soil, but it crumbled like sand. His men fled into the forest, shouting in terror. "No! You cannot do this to me!" Okenna cried, his voice breaking. "I am the rightful chief." But the earth paid no heed. With one last cry, he was swallowed whole, the crack sealing over him as if he had never been. Silence fell again. The forest exhaled. The trembling stopped. Adana stood in the clearing, the light fading from around her. She was alone, yet not alone. She could feel the presence of the ancestors, steady and sure. Slowly, she walked back toward the village. The fire at the yam barn had been put out, though much of the food was gone. The people sat in despair, heads in their hands. Then they saw her. Some gasped, others whispered her name. Mama Ifioma ran forward, tears streaming down her face. "Child, we thought you were lost." Adana lifted her hands. "Do not cry. The land has judged again. Okenna will trouble us no more. But listen, this is the lesson. Greed destroys, but kindness saves. If we share what we have, the land will bless us. If we hoard, the land will curse us." The people listened, their hearts heavy with guilt. One by one, they brought out what food they had left hidden in their huts: dried fish, groundnuts, small baskets of grain. Together they shared. The next day, hunters returned with game as if the forest itself had opened its hand. Farmers found fresh yams sprouting where the ground had cracked. The land was no longer angry. From then on, the village lived differently. They built a new yam barn, but this time it was guarded not by soldiers, but by the promise that no one would go hungry again. Adana was not called chief, for she never asked for titles. Instead, the people named her daughter of the land. Whenever disputes arose, they turned to her, and her words carried the weight of truth. Years later, when people spoke of those times, they would begin with awe. There was once a wicked chief who ordered an orphan girl to be buried alive for stealing a yam. But the land itself rose, and 3 days later, something shocking happened. And the lesson was always the same. Greed digs its own grave, but kindness gives life.